Part 1. SamadhiPada. Samadhi means yoga, and yoga means samadhi. This pada therefore explains the significance of yoga as well as of samadhi. Both mean profound meditation and supreme devotion. For aspirants endowed with perfect physical health, mental poise, discriminative intelligence, and a spiritual bent, Patanjali provides guidance in the disciplines of practice and detachment to help them attain the spiritual zenith, the vision of the soul. That's Atma Darsana. The word chitta has often been translated as mind. In the West, it is considered that mind not only has the power of conation or volition, cognition and motion, but also that of discrimination. But chitta really means consciousness. Indian philosophers analyzed chitta and divided it into three facets: mind, or manas, intelligence, or buddhi, and ego, or the sense of self, ahamkara. They divided the mental body into two parts: the mental sheath and the intellectual sheath. People have thus come to think of consciousness and mind as the same. In this work, consciousness refers both to the mental sheath, that's Manomaya Kosha, as mind, and the intellectual sheath, that's Vijnanamaya Kosha, as wisdom. Mind acquires knowledge objectively, whereas intelligence learns through subjective experience, which becomes wisdom. As cosmic intelligence is the first principle of nature, so consciousness is the first principle of man. Sutra 1.1. Atta Yoganushasanam. Atta means now, auspiciousness, a prayer, a blessing, benediction, authority, a good omen. Yoga means joining, union, junction, combination, application, use, means, result, deep meditation, concentration, contemplation of the Supreme Spirit. Anushasanam means advice, direction, order, command, instructions, laying down rules and precepts, a revised text, introduction, or guide given in procedural form. Thus it means guidance in the codes of conduct which are to be observed, and which form the base from which to cultivate one's ethical and spiritual life. Atta Yoganushasanam. With prayers for divine blessings, now begins an exposition of the sacred art of yoga. Now follows a detailed exposition of the discipline of yoga, given step by step, in the right order, and with proper direction for self-alignment. Patanjali is the first to offer us a codification of yoga, its practice and precepts, and the immediacy of the new light he is shedding on a known and ancient subject is emphasized by his use of the word now. His reappraisal, based on his own experience, explores fresh ground and bequeaths us a lasting monumental work. In the cultural context of his time, his words must have been crystal clear, and even to the spiritually impoverished modern mind, they are never confused, although they are often most impenetrably condensed. The word now can also be seen in the context of a progression from Patanjali's previous works, his treatise on grammar and on Ayurveda. Logically, we must consider these to predate the Yoga Sutras, as grammar is a prerequisite of lucid speech and clear comprehension, and Ayurvedic medicine of bodily cleanliness and inner equilibrium. Together, these works served as preparation for Patanjali's crowning exposition of yoga, the cultivation and eventual transcendence of consciousness, culminating in liberation from the cycles of rebirth. These works are collectively known as Moksha Shastras, meaning spiritual sciences, treatises which trace man's evolution from physical and mental bondage toward ultimate freedom. A treatise on yoga flows naturally from the Ayurvedic work and guides the aspirant, or sadhaka, to a trained and balanced state of consciousness. In this first chapter, Patanjali analyzes the components of consciousness and its behavioral patterns, and explains how its fluctuations can be stilled in order to achieve inner absorption and integration. In the second, he reveals the whole linking mechanism of yoga, by means of which ethical conduct, bodily vigor and health, and physiological vitality are built into the structure of the human evolutionary progress towards freedom. In the third chapter, Patanjali prepares the mind to reach the soul. In the fourth, he shows how the mind dissolves into the consciousness, and the consciousness into the soul, and how the sadhaka drinks the nectar of immortality. The Brahma Sutra, a treatise dealing with Vedanta philosophy, which is the knowledge of Brahman, also begins with the word Atha, or now. Attato Brahma Jinyasa. There, now stands for the desire to know Brahman. Brahman is dealt with as the object of study, and is discussed and explored throughout as the object. In the Yoga Sutras, it is the seer or the true self who is to be discovered and known. Yoga is therefore considered to be a subjective art, science, and philosophy. Yoga has various connotations, as mentioned at the outset, but here it stands for Samadhi, the indivisible state of existence. So this sutra may be taken to mean the disciplines of integration are here expounded through experience, and are given to humanity for the exploration and recognition of that hidden part of man which is beyond the awareness of the senses. Sutra 1.2 Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga means union or integration from the outermost layer to the innermost self, that is, from the skin to the muscles, bones, nerves, mind, intellect, will, consciousness, and self. Chitta means consciousness, which is made up of three factors: mind or manas, intellect or buddhi, and ego, ahamkara. Chitta is the vehicle of observation, attention, aims, and reason. It has three functions: cognition, conation or volition, and motion. Vritti means state of mind, fluctuations in mind, course of conduct, behavior, a state of being, mode of action, movement, function, operation. Nirodha means obstruction, stoppage, opposition, annihilation, restraint, control, cessation. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the cessation of movements in the consciousness. Yoga is defined as restraint of fluctuations in the consciousness. It is the art of studying the behavior of consciousness, which has three functions: cognition, conation or volition, and motion. Yoga shows ways of understanding the functionings of the mind and helps to quieten their movements, leading one towards the undisturbed state of silence, which dwells in the very seat of consciousness. Yoga is thus the art and science of mental discipline, through which the mind becomes cultured and matured. This vital sutra contains the definition of yoga, the control or restraint of the movement of consciousness, leading to their complete cessation. Chitta is the vehicle which takes the mind, manas, toward the soul, atma. Yoga is the cessation of all vibration in the seat of consciousness. It is extremely difficult to convey the meaning of the word chitta, because it is the subtlest form of cosmic intelligence, meaning Mahat. Mahat is the great principle, the source of the material world of nature, or Prakriti, as opposed to the soul, which is an offshoot of nature. According to Sankhya philosophy, creation is affected by the mingling of Prakriti and Purusha, the cosmic soul. This view of cosmology is also accepted by the Yoga philosophy. The principles of Purusha and Prakriti are the source of all action, volition, and silence. Words such as Chitta, Buddhi, and Mahat are so often used interchangeably that the student can easily become confused. One way to structure one's understanding is to remember that every phenomenon which has reached its full evolution or individuation has a subtle or cosmic counterpart. Thus we translate Buddhi as the individual discriminating intelligence and consider Mahat to be its cosmic counterpart. Similarly, the individuated consciousness Chitta is matched by its subtle form Chit. For the purpose of self-realization, the highest awareness of consciousness and the most refined faculty of intelligence have to work so much in partnership that it is not always useful to split hairs by separating them. The thinking principle or conscience, that's antakarana, links the motivating principle of nature, mahat, to individual consciousness, which can be thought of as a fluid enveloping ego, that's ahamkara, intelligence, buddhi, and mind, manas. This fluid tends to become cloudy and opaque due to its contact with the external world via three components. The sadhaka's aim is to bring the consciousness to a state of purity and translucence. It is important to note that consciousness not only links evolved or manifest nature to non-evolved or subtle nature, it is also closest to the soul itself, which does not belong to nature, but merely immanent in it. Buddhi possesses the decisive knowledge which is determined by perfect action and experience. Manas gathers and collects information through the five senses of perception, jnanendriyas, and the five organs of action, karmendriyas. Cosmic intelligence, ego, individual intelligence, mind, the five senses of perception, and the five organs of action are the products of the five elements of nature: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, or Prithvi, Ap, Tejas, Vayu, and Akasha, with their infra-atomic qualities of smell, taste, form or sight, touch, and sound, that is, Gandha, Rasa, Rupa, Sparsha, and Shabda. In order to help man to understand himself, the sages analyzed human beings as composed of five sheaths or koshas. The first sheath, anatomical, that's Annamaya. Its corresponding element is earth. The second sheath is physiological, Pranamaya. Its corresponding element is water. The third sheath is mental, Manomaya. Its corresponding element is fire. The fourth sheath is intellectual, Vijnanamaya. Its corresponding element is air. And the fifth sheath is blissful, Anandamaya. Its corresponding element is ether. The first three sheaths are within the field of the elements of nature. The intellectual sheath is said to be the layer of the individual soul, or the Jivatman, and the blissful sheath the layer of the universal soul, that's Param Atman. In effect, all five sheaths have to be penetrated to reach emancipation. The innermost content of the sheaths, beyond even the blissful body, is Purusha, the indivisible, non-manifest one, the void which is full. This is experienced in Nirbija Samadhi, whereas Sabija Samadhi is experienced at the level of the blissful body. If Ahamkara, meaning ego, is considered to be one end of a thread, then Antar-Atma, meaning universal self, is the other end. Antakarana, meaning conscious, is the unifier of the two. The practice of yoga integrates a person through the journey of intelligence and consciousness from the external to the internal. It unifies him from the intelligence of the skin to the intelligence of the self, so that his self merges with the cosmic self. This is the merging of one half of one's being, or Prakriti, with the other, that's Purusha. Through yoga, the practitioner learns to observe and to think, and to intensify his effort until eternal joy is attained. This is possible only when the vibrations of the individual chitta are arrested before they emerge. Yoga, the restraint of fluctuating thought, leads to a sattvic state. But in order to restrain the fluctuations, force of will is necessary. Hence, a degree of rajas is involved. Restraint of the movements of thought brings about stillness, which leads to deep silence with awareness. This is the sattvic nature of the chitta. Stillness is concentration, or dharana, and silence is meditation, or dhyana. Concentration needs a focus or a form, and this focus is ahamkara, one's own small individual self. When concentration flows into meditation, that self loses its identity and becomes one with the great self. Like two sides of a coin, Ahamkara and Atma are two opposite poles in man. The sadhaka is influenced by the self on the one hand, and by objects perceived on the other. When he is engrossed in the subject, his mind fluctuates, This is vritti. His aim should be to distinguish the self from the objects seen, so that it does not become enmeshed by them. Through yoga, he should try to free his consciousness from the temptations of such objects and bring it closer to the seer. Restraining the fluctuations of the mind is a process which leads to an end, samadhi. Initially, yoga acts as the means of restraint. When the sadhaka has attained a total sense of restraint, yogic discipline is accomplished and the end is reached. The consciousness remains pure. Thus, yoga is both the means and the end. Sutra 1.3 Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. Tada means then, at that time. Drashtu means the soul, the seer. Swarupe means in his own, in his state. Avasthanam means rests, abides, dwells, resides, radiates. Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. Then the seer dwells in his own true splendor. When the waves of consciousness are stilled and silenced, they can no longer distort the true expression of the soul. Revealed in his own nature, the radiant seer abides in his own grandeur. Volition being the mode of behavior of the mind, it is liable to change our perception of the state and condition of the seer from moment to moment. When it is restrained and regulated, a reflective state of being is experienced. In this state, knowledge dawns so clearly that the grandeur of the seer is seen and felt. This vision of the soul radiates without any activity on the part of citta. Once it is realized, the soul abides in its own seat. Sutra 1.4 Vritti sarupya itaratra. Vritti means behavior, fluctuation, modification, function, state of mind. Sarupyam is identification, likeness, closeness, nearness. Itaratra is at other times or elsewhere. Vritti sarupya itaratra. At other times, the seer identifies with the fluctuating consciousness. When the seer identifies with consciousness or with the objects seen, he unites with them and forgets his grandeur. The natural tendency of consciousness is to become involved with the object seen, draw the seer towards it, and move the seer to identify with it. Then the seer becomes engrossed in the object. This becomes the seed for diversification of the intelligence and makes the seer forget his own radiant awareness. When the soul does not radiate its own glory, it is a sign that the thinking faculty has manifested itself in place of the soul. The imprint of objects is transmitted to citta through the senses of perception. Citta absorbs these sensory impressions and becomes colored and modified by them. Objects act as provender for the grazing citta, which is attracted to them by its appetite. Citta projects itself, taking on the form of the objects in order to possess them. Thus it becomes enveloped by thoughts of the object, with the result that the soul is obscured. In this way, Chitta becomes murky and causes changes in behavior and mood as it identifies itself with things seen. Although in reality Chitta is a formless entity, it can be helpful to visualize it in order to grasp its functions and limitations. Let us imagine it to be like an optical lens, containing no light of its own, but placed directly above a source of pure light, the soul. One face of the lens, facing inwards toward the light, remains clean. We are normally aware of this internal facet of Chitta only when it speaks to us with the voice of conscience. In daily life, however, we are very much aware of the upper surface of the lens, facing outwards to the world and linked to it by senses and mind. This surface serves both as a sense and as a content of consciousness, along with ego and intelligence. Worked upon by the desires and fears of turbulent worldly life, it becomes cloudy, opaque, even dirty and scarred, and prevents the soul's light from shining through it. Lacking inner illumination, it seeks all the more avidly the artificial lights of conditioned existence. The whole technique of yoga, its practice and restraint, is aimed at disassociating consciousness from its identification with the phenomenal world, at restraining the senses by which it is ensnared, and at cleansing and purifying the lens of Chitta until it transmits wholly and only the light of the soul. Sutra 1.5 Vrittaya Panchataya Klishta Aklishta. Vrittaya means movements, modification. Panchataya is fivefold. Klishta means afflicting, tormenting, distressing, painful. Aklishta means untroubling, undisturbing, unafflicting, undistressing, pleasing. Vrittaya Panchataya Klishta Aklishtaha. The movements of consciousness are fivefold. They may be cognizable or non-cognizable, painful or non-painful. Fluctuations or modifications of the mind may be painful or non-painful, cognizable or non-cognizable. Pain may be hidden in the non-painful state, and the non-painful may be hidden in the painful state. Either may be cognizable or non-cognizable. When consciousness takes the lead, naturally the seer takes a back seat. The seed of change is in the consciousness and not in the seer. Consciousness sees objects in relation to its own idiosyncrasies, creating fluctuations and modifications in one's thoughts. These modifications, of which there are 5, are explained in the next sutra. They may be visible or hidden, painful or not, distressing or pleasing, cognizable or non-cognizable. The previous sutra explains that the consciousness involves the seer with the objects seen by it, and invites 5 types of fluctuations which can be divided and subdivided almost infinitely. Thoughts, when associated with anguish, are known as painful or klishta conditions of the mind and consciousness. For example, a live coal covered with ashes appears to be ash. If one touches it, it burns the skin at once. The live coal was an incognizable or aklishta state. The moment the skin was burned, it became cognizable or klishta. As anguish predominates in pain, the pleasing state cannot be identified with it, though it exists side by side. The pleasure of sex ends in the agony of labor pain at the time of delivery, to be followed by all the cycles of joy, worry, and sadness associated with parenthood. Even highly evolved souls who have reached a certain spiritual height, as in Sutra 1.18, which describes a non-painful, blissful state, are cautioned by Patanjali in 1.19. He warns that, though the yogi remains free while the virtuous potencies continue to be powerful, the moment they fade away he has to strive again, a painful end to the attainment of the spiritual pinnacle. Alternatively, the pains may be hidden, and may appear as non-painful for a long time until they surface. For example, cancer can remain undetected for a long time until it reaches a painful and tormenting state. Cognizable pains and anguishes are controlled or annihilated by the practice of yoga and by willpower. Incognizable pains are prevented from rising to the state of cognition by freedom from desires or vasanas, and by non-attachment or vairagya, in addition to yogic sadhana. In 11.12, Patanjali uses the word drashta, meaning visible, and adrashta, meaning unperceived or invisible. These may be compared to klishta and aklishta. Nature causes the five fluctuations to appear in their effective klishta forms, whereas Purusha tends to bring them to the aklishta state. For example, the klishta form of memory is bondage in psychological time. The aklishta form is the function of discrimination. Both the painful and non-painful states can be visible or hidden. The known, visible pains and pleasures can be reduced or eradicated. In painful states, the non-pains may be hidden, and consequently the virtues are difficult to recognize or perceive. Both these states must be stopped by yogic practice and renunciation. In Sutras 1.23, 27, 28, 33 to 39, and in 11.29, Patanjali underlies the meaning of reaching the zenith of virtue, which is freedom and beatitude. The chitta acts as the wheel, while the klishta and aklishta states are like the two spokes of the wheel, which cause fluctuations and modulations in one's self. The vrittis in the klishta and aklishta manifestations are not separate parallel entities, but feed and support each other. For example, the dullness, which is the negative aspect of sleep, supports the wrong perception of the other modulations of consciousness, whereas the positive experience of sleep, the passive, virtuous state experienced immediately on waking when the I is silent, gives a glimmer of a higher state, encouraging the efforts of right knowledge and discrimination. If the wheel is at rest, the spokes remain steady, and the chitta becomes free from vrittis. Sutra 1.6 Pramana viparyaya vikalpa nidra smrtaya. Pramana means valid knowledge, experienced knowledge, correct knowledge, which is studied and verified, proof or evidence. Viparyaya means inverted, perverse, contrary. Vikalpa means doubt, indecision, hesitation, fancy, imagination, or daydreaming. Nidra means sleep or a state of emptiness. Smrtaya means memory. Pramana viparyaya vikalpa nidra smrtaya. They are caused by correct knowledge, illusion, delusion, sleep, and memory. These five-fold fluctuations or modifications of consciousness are based on real perception or correct knowledge based on fact and proof, unreal or perverse perception or illusion, fanciful or imaginary knowledge, knowledge based on sleep and memory. Consciousness has five qualitative types of intelligence. Muddha, meaning silly, stupid, or ignorant. Shipta, meaning neglected or distracted. Vikshipta, meaning agitated or scattered. Ekagra, meaning one-pointed or closely attentive. And Niruddha, meaning restrained or controlled. Since conscious intelligence is of five types, fluctuations are also classified into five types: correct knowledge, perverse perception, imagination, knowledge based on sleep, and memory. These five conscious states of intelligence and five classes of fluctuations may disturb the sadhaka or help him to develop maturity of intelligence and attain emancipation. Wrong perceptions, or viparyaya, are gathered by the senses of perception and influence the mind to accept what is felt by them, as in the story of the 6 blind men and the elephant. Fanciful knowledge, or vikalpa, causes the mind to live in an imaginary state without consideration of the facts. Memory, or smriti, helps one to recollect experiences for right understanding. Sleep, or nidra, has its own peculiarity. As a jar, when empty, is filled with air, so consciousness is empty in sleep. It exists in space, without a place, and is filled with dormancy. In sleep, one has a glimpse of a quiet state of mind, manolaya. This dormant state of mind is felt only on waking. Just as a flower, when at rest, is in its bud, so the consciousness rests in its bud, the conscience. Correct knowledge, or pramana, is direct knowledge from the core of the being. It is intuitive, therefore pure, and beyond the field of intellect. Direct knowledge leads man beyond the conscious state. This state of consciousness is called amanaskatva. Sutra 1.7 Pratyaksha anumana agama pramanani. Pratyaksha means direct perception. Anumana means inference. Agama means traditional sacred texts or scriptural references, a person who is a scriptural authority and whose word can be relied on. Pramanani means kinds of proof. Pratyaksha Anumana Agama Pramanani. Correct knowledge is direct, inferred or proven as factual. Correct knowledge is based on three kinds of proof: direct perception, correct inference or deduction, and testimony from authoritative sacred scriptures or experienced person. Initially, individual perception should be checked by reasoned logic, and then seen to correspond to traditional or scriptural wisdom. This process involves the enlightened intelligence or buddhi. In modern intellectual terms, we take buddhi to be a monolithic entity. This is unhelpful when trying to understand its true role in our lives and in our yogic practice. Let us first separate it from mind, in which brain, whose function is to receive sensory information, to think, and to act, has its source. Thinking expresses itself in the form of electromagnetic waves. Intellect is more subtle than mind. It is concerned with the knowledge of facts and the reasoning faculty, and becomes discernible only through its inherent quality, intelligence, which is closer to consciousness than to the mind or thought process. Intelligence is inherent in every aspect of our being, from the physical to the blissful. It is non-manifest only in the Atman Purusha, the core of being. The quality of intelligence is inherent but dormant. So our first step must be to awaken it. The practice of asana brings intelligence to the surface of the cellular body through stretching, and to the physiological body by maintaining the pose. Once awakened, intelligence can reveal its dynamic aspect, its ability to discriminate. Then we strive for equal extensions to achieve a balanced, stable pose, measuring upper arm stretch against lower right leg, against left, inner against outer, etc. This precise, thorough process of measuring and discriminating is the apprenticeship or culturing of intelligence. It is pursued in the internal sheaths by pranayama, pratyahara, and the further stages of yoga. We can thus see that discrimination is a weighing process belonging to the world of duality. When what is wrong is discarded, what is left must be correct. When discrimination has been cultivated and intelligence is full and bright, ego and mind retreat, and chitta becomes sharp and clear. But spiritual intelligence, which is true wisdom, dawns only when discrimination ends. Wisdom does not function in duality. It perceives only oneness. It does not discard the wrong. It sees only the right. Patanjali calls this exalted intelligence, or vivekajnanam. Wisdom is not mingled with nature, and is indeed unsuitable for the problems of life in a dualistic world. It would be of no use to a politician, for example, however high his motives, for he must choose and decide in the relative and temporal world. Spiritual wisdom does not decide. It knows. It is beyond time. However, the progressive refinement of intelligence is essential in the search for freedom. The discriminating intellect should be used to diffuse the negative impact of memory, which links us in physiological time to the world of sensory pleasure and pain. All matter, from rocks to human cells, contains its own inherent intelligence, but only man has the capacity to awaken, culture, and finally transcend intelligence. Just as the totally pure Chitta, free from sensory entanglements, gravitates toward the Atman, so once intelligence has achieved the highest knowledge of nature, it is drawn inwards toward the soul. Buddhi has the capacity to perceive itself. Its innate virtue is honesty. Sutra 1.8 Viparyayo mithyanyanam attadrupa pratishtam. Viparyayo means perverse or unreal. Mithyanyanam means illusory knowledge. Attadrupa is not in its own form. Pratishtam means occupying, standing, seeing, beholding. Viparyayo mithyananam attadrupa pratishtam. Illusory or erroneous knowledge is based on non-fact or the non-real. Perverse, illusory, or wrong knowledge is caused by error or misconception, or by mistaking one thing for another. It is based on the distortion of reality. Wrong understanding and false conceptions generate wrong feelings and taint the consciousness. This hinders the sadhaka in his efforts to experience the seer, and may create a dual or split personality. Sutra 1.9 Sabdanyana anupati vastusunya vikalpaha. Sabdanyana means verbal knowledge. Anupati means followed in sequence, pursued, phased in regular succession. Vastusunya means devoid of things, devoid of substance or meaning. Vikalpaha means imagination or fancy. Sabdanyana anupati vastusunya vikalpaha. Verbal knowledge devoid of substance is fancy or imagination. Playing with fanciful thoughts or words, and living in one's own world of thoughts and impressions which have no substantial basis, is vikalpa, a vague and uncertain knowledge which does not correspond to reality. In such a state of delusion, one is like the hare in the fable who imagined it had horns. If vikalpa is brought to the level of factual knowledge by analysis, trial, error, and discrimination, it can awaken a thirst for correct or true knowledge, and delusion can be transformed into vision and discovery. Unless and until such a transformation takes place, knowledge based on imagination remains without substance. Sutra 1.10 Abhava pratyaya alambana vrittihi nidra. Abhava means non-existence, a feeling of non-being, absence of awareness. Pratyaya means going towards conviction, trust, confidence, reliance, usage, knowledge, understanding, instrument, means, intellect. Alambana means support, abode, dependence on a prop, mental exercise to bring before one's thoughts the gross form of the eternal. Vritti means function, condition, thought wave. Nidra means sleep without dreams. Abhava pratyaya alambana vrittihi nidra. Sleep is the non-deliberate absence of thought waves or knowledge. Dreamless sleep is an inert state of consciousness in which the sense of existence is not felt. Sleep is a state in which all activities of thought and feeling come to an end. In sleep, the senses of perception rest in the mind in the consciousness, and the consciousness in the being. Sleep is of three types. If one feels heavy and dull after sleep, that sleep has been tamasic. Disturbed sleep is rajasic. Sleep that brings lightness, brightness, and freshness is sattvic. In the states of correct knowledge, perverse knowledge, fanciful knowledge, and knowledge born of memory, one is awake. Mind and consciousness are drawn by the senses into contact with external objects. Thus, one gains knowledge. In deep sleep, these four types of knowledge are absent. The senses of perception cease to function because their king, the mind, is at rest. This abhava, a state of void, a feeling of emptiness. The sadhaka, having experienced this negative state of void in sleep, tries to transform it into a positive state of mind while awake. Then he experiences that pure state in which the self is free from the knowledge of things seen, heard, acquired or felt through the senses and the mind. When he has learned to silence all the modulations of mind and consciousness, then he has reached Kaivalya. He has sublimated the vrittis and become a master. His chitta is submerged in the soul. Sleep gives one a glimpse of the seer, but only indistinctly because the light of discrimination, viveka, is clouded. Simulation of this state of sleep, when one is awake and aware, is samadhi, wherein the seer witnesses his own form. Sutra 1.11 Anubhuta Visaya Sampramosa Smritihi. Anubhuta means perceived, apprehended, experienced, knowledge, derived from direct perception, inference and comparison, verbal knowledge. Visaya means an object, a sense of object, an affair, a transaction. Asampramosa means not allowing to slip away, without stealing from anything else. Smriti means memory of a thing experienced, recollection of words or experiences. Anubhuta Visaya Samapramosa Smritihi. Memory is the unmodified recollection of words and experiences. Memory is the collection of the modulations and impressions of correct knowledge perverse knowledge, illusory knowledge, and sleep. As perception changes, memory too may alter, but correctly used, it enables us to recall experiences in their true, pristine state. This ability is the foundation of the practice of discrimination. The 5 properties of consciousness can be equated with the 5 fluctuations of consciousness: dullness with nidra, negligence with viparya, agitation with vikalpa, one-pointedness with smriti, and restraint or control with pramana. Sutra 1.12 Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tanirodha. Abhyasa means repeated practice. Vairagyabhyam means freedom from desires, detachment, renunciation. Tanirodha means their restraint. Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tanirodha. Practice and detachment are the means to still the movements of consciousness. The fluctuations of consciousness, painful or non-painful, described in 1.5 and 1.6, are to be controlled through repeated yogic practice. Mental strength must also be developed to attain detachment and freedom from desires. Study of the consciousness and stilling it is practice, or abhyasa. Elsewhere, in 11.28, Patanjali has used another word, anusthana. Abhyasa conveys the sense of mechanical repetition, whereas anusthana implies devotion, dedication, a religious attitude. Repeated effort made with thorough understanding of the art and philosophy of yoga, and with perfect communion of body, mind, and soul, is not a mechanical practice, but a religious and spiritual one. Practice is the positive aspect of yoga. Detachment or renunciation, that's vairagya, the negative. The two balance each other like day and night, inhalation and exhalation. Practice is the path of evolution. Detachment and renunciation, the path of involution. Practice is involved in all the 8 limbs of yoga. Evolutionary practice is the onward march towards discovery of the self, involving yama, niyama, asana, and pranayama. The involuntary path of renunciation involves pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. This inward journey detaches the consciousness from external objects. Patanjali's practice represents the ha, or sun aspect, and renunciation the ta, or moon aspect of Hatha Yoga. In Hatha Yoga, ha represents the life force and ta the consciousness. Ha also represents the very being, the seer, while ta is the reflected light of the seer, representing chitta. Through Hatha Yoga, these two forces are blended and then merged in the seer. To be adept in yoga, yama and niyama must be observed carefully throughout the yogic sadhana. This is abhyasa, the discarding of ideas and actions which obstruct progress in sadhana is vairagya. As we know, consciousness becomes involved with the objects seen and identifies with them, drawing the seer with it. Then the seer becomes subordinate to the oscillating mind. The 8 aspects of yoga described in 11.29 are given to us as a means to stop the wavering of the intelligence and to learn correct understanding. Although the first 4 relate to practice and the others to renunciation, practice and renunciation are interdependent and equally important. Without restraint, the forces generated by practice would spin out of control and could destroy the sadhaka. At the higher levels, vairagya without abhyasa could lead to stagnation and inner decay. The first 4 aspects are considered a building up process, and the last 4 one of inner consolidation. Once our initial tamasic nature moves towards a dynamic state, restraint becomes necessary for our own inner security. Vairagya is a practice through which the sadhaka learns to be free from desires and passions, and to cultivate non-attachment to things which hinder his pursuit of union with the soul. The disciplines which are to be followed are explained in the succeeding sutras. Sutra 1.13 Tatra stitau yatna abhyasa. Tatra means of these, or under these circumstances, in that case. Stitau means as regards steadiness, or as regards perfect restraint. Yatna means continuous effort. Abhyasa means practice. Tatra stitau yatna abhyasa. Practice is the steadfast effort to still these fluctuations. Practice is the effort to still the fluctuations of the consciousness, and then to move towards silencing it, to attain a constant, steady, tranquil state of mind. In order to free the mind from fluctuations and oscillations, and to reach a state of steadiness, the practitioner is advised to practice intensely all the yogic principles from yama to dhyana. These embrace all disciplines: moral, ethical, physical, mental, intellectual, and spiritual. For the applications of the mind to the practice, see Sutra 120. Sutra 1.14 Satu dirgha kala nairantarya satkara asevata dradham bhumihi. Sa means this, tu means and, dirgha kala means for a long time, nairantarya means without interruption or continuous, satkara means dedication or devotion, asevata means zealously practiced, performed assiduously, and dradhabhumihi means of firm ground, firmly rooted or well fixed. Satu dirghakala nairantarya satkara asevata dradhambhumihi. Long, uninterrupted, alert practice is the firm foundation for restraining the fluctuations. When the effort is continued in accordance with yogic principles consistently and for a long time, with earnestness, attention, application, and devotion, the yogic foundation is firmly established. Profound wisdom is gained through steady, dedicated, attentive practice, and non-attachment through applied restraint. However, success may inflate the sadhaka's ego, and he should be careful not to become a victim of intellectual pride, which may drag him away from enlightenment. If this happens, he should re-establish his practice, by taking guidance from a competent master, or through his own discrimination, so that humility replaces pride and spiritual wisdom dawns. This is correct practice. Sutra 1.15 Drishta anusvarika visaya vitrishnasya vasikara samnya vairagyam. Drishta means perceptible, visible. Anusvarika means heard or listening, resting on the Vedas or on tradition according to oral testimony. Visaya means a thing, an object of enjoyment, matter. Vitrishnasya means freedom from desire, contentment. Vasikara means subjugation, supremacy, bringing under control. Samnya means consciousness, intellect, understanding. Vairagyam means absence of worldly desires and passions, dispassion, detachment, indifference to the world, renunciation. Drashta anusvarika visaya vritrishnasya vaisara samnya vairagyam. Renunciation is the practice of detachment from desires. When non-attachment and detachment are learned, there is no craving for objects seen or unseen, words heard or unheard. Then the seer remains unmoved by temptations. This is the sign of mastery in the art of renunciation. Non-attachment and detachment must be learned through willpower. They consist of learning to be free from cravings, not only for worldly, but also heavenly pleasures. Chitta is taught to be unmoved by thoughts of desires and passion, and to remain in a state of pure consciousness, devoid of all objects and free even from the qualities of sattva, rajas, and tamas. The mind is considered by the sages to be the 11th sense. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin are the 5 senses of perception. The arms, legs, mouth, generative and excretory organs are the 5 organs of action. These are the external senses. The mind is an internal sense organ. There are 5 states in Vairagya. The first, disengaging the senses from enjoyment of their objects and controlling them, is Yattamana. As it is not possible to control all the senses at once, one should attempt to control them one by one to achieve mastery over them. The second, by thoughtful control, one burns away the desires which obstruct Chitta's movement toward the soul. This is Vyatirika. The third, when the 5 senses of perception and 5 organs of action have been weaned away from contact with objects, the feeblest desires remain in a causal state and are felt only in the mind. This is Ekendriya. The mind wants to play a dual role, to fulfill the desires of the senses and also to experience self-realization. Once the senses have been silenced, the mind moves with one pointed effort toward soul realization. The fourth, Vasikara, is attained when one has overcome all longings and developed indifference to all types of attachment, non-attachment, and detachment. All 11 senses have been subjugated. The fifth, from these develops Para Vairagya, the highest form of renunciation. It is free from the qualities of sattva, rajas, and tamas. On attaining this state, the sadhaka ceases to be concerned with himself or with others who remain caught in the web of pleasure. Often we come across renounced persons who get caught in the pleasures and comforts of life and neglect their sadhana. We should learn from such examples and guard ourselves so that we develop firmness in our sadhana. A bird cannot fly with one wing. It needs two wings to fly, to reach the highest spiritual goal. The two wings of yoga, abhyasa and vairagya, are essential. Sutra 1.16 Tat param purushakyate gunavaitrasnyam. Tat param means that highest, that most excellent, the ultimate, the best, the purest, the supreme. Purushakyate means the highest knowledge of the soul, perception of the soul. Gunavaitrasnyam means indifference to the qualities of nature, inertia or dormancy, tamas, passion or vibrance, rajas, and luminosity or serenity, sattva. Tat param purushakyate gunavaitrasnyam. The ultimate renunciation is when one transcends the qualities of nature and perceives the soul. The purest form of renunciation is when one is free from the qualities of nature. One realizes the soul at once. Clear intelligence of head and heart leads to this. If through abhyasa we activate and purify our energy, through vairagya we disentangle ourselves from involvement in even the subtlest manifestations of the phenomenal world. The creation of energy alone, without control or restraint, cannot lead to freedom. To understand the 5 levels of vairagya, one should refer to the model of nature's evolution described in the introduction in the section on SamadhiPada. Here we see the unfolding of nature from its nominal or alinga state into the linga state through mahat, then from the non-specific or avishesha phenomenon, including ahamkara, ego or I consciousness, to the manifest or vishesha expressions of nature which form the basis of our experience of everyday reality. The reverse or involutionary process, which is the path of yoga, can be seen as the ascension of a ladder. Abhyasa gives us the necessary impetus for the ascent. By vairagya, we draw up the ladder behind us. The lower rungs of renunciation are attempted by anyone who tries to disentangle himself from such a habit as smoking or drinking coffee. We cut down, then we stop, but the desire persists in the mind. When that mental desire has faded away, years later, our body cells may spontaneously rekindle attachment. Later still, we may find we become attached to the idea of ourselves as non-drinkers of coffee. So the ego is still attached to the idea of coffee, even though it is now non-coffee. This is self-conscious virtue. Gradually we may become totally indifferent to coffee, but coffee nonetheless still exists in our mind. This sutra relates to the ultimate freedom achieved through para-vairagya. Here phenomenal nature ceases to exist for us. As the gunas are transcended, drawn back into their nominal root. By transcending the gunas, we unlock that which binds us to nature. When this is achieved in all our involvements, the soul is fully perceived. The consciousness has now, by the power of wisdom, acquired everything that has to be acquired, and discarded everything that has to be discarded. The sadhaka is free from all bondage, but there is no feeling of birth and death. Kaivalya is attained. This is the effect of the twin disciplines of Abhyasa and Vairagya, through which the sadhaka becomes free and wise, untainted by the influence of Chitta. In 4.29, the word prashankyana, meaning highest knowledge, has been used. Again in Sutra 4.31, there is the expression sarvarana malapetsya, which means when all obstructing impurities are destroyed totally. Then follows purushakyati, signifying perception of the soul. Sutra 1.17 Vitarka vikara ananda asmita rupa anugamat sampragnataha. Vitarka means analytical thinking or analytical study, argument, inference, conjecture. Vikara means reason, meditation, insight, perfect intelligence where all logic comes to an end. Ananda means elation, bliss, felicity. Asmita Rupa means consciousness of being one with oneself. Anugamat means by accompanying, by following, comprehending or grasping. Sampragnataha means distinguish, know actually, know accurately. Vitarka vikara ananda asmita rupa anugamat sampragnataha. Practice and attachment develop four types of samadhi: self-analysis, synthesis, bliss, and the experience of pure being. Through practice and attachment, four types of awareness develop: absorption of the consciousness achieved through engrossment in conjecture, inference and analytical study; synthesis, consideration and discrimination; bliss or elation, and a state of pure being, constitutes sampragnata samadhi. Here a distinction is recognized between the seer and the seen. Sampragnata samadhi consists of vitarka, engrossment in analysis; vikara, engrossment in reasoning; ananda, experiencing a state of bliss; and asmita, experiencing the state of I. Vitarka is an act of involvement by deliberate thinking and study, which leads to the final point or root cause. It is an attempt to distinguish the cause from the effect, a process of judicious experimental research from the gross to the subtle. Intellectual analysis, vitarka sampragnata, being a function of the brain, produces relative and conditioned knowledge. It is gross and lacks refinement. It is further divided into deliberation, savitarka, and non-deliberation, nirvitarka. Vikara means differentiating knowledge. It is a process of investigation, reflection, and consideration through which the wandering, conjectural brain is stilled, and the sadhaka develops mental depth, acuteness, refinement, and subtlety. Vikara too is divided into reasoning, savikara, or non-reasoning, nirvikara. As the growing body of experience brings maturity, fulfillment is reached, and a state of bliss or ananda ensues, freeing the sadhaka from the mechanism of study, investigation, and fulfillment, and leading him to dwell in the self alone. This state is called asmita rupa sampragnata samadhi. Thus, all 6 gradations of sabija samadhi, meaning samadhi with support or seed, that is, savitarka, nirvitarka, savikara, nirvikara, ananda, and asmita, are explained. There is a 7th stage of samadhi, virama pratyaya, so called asampragnata samadhi, and an 8th called dharma megha or nirbija samadhi. As external objects are susceptible to change, deliberation may not be pure. One must go from the periphery to the source. Vikara is beyond vitarka. Ananda is beyond vitarka and vikara. And asmita is beyond vitarka, vikara, and ananda. This is the gradual process from the gross body towards the subtle mind, and from the subtle mind towards the source, the core of being. Savitarka and nirvitarka samadhi belong to the function of the brain, and are attained by contemplation on gross elements and objects knowable through the senses. Savikara and nirvikara samadhi belong to the realm of the mind, and are attained by contemplation of subtle elements. And ananda belongs to the realm of mature intelligence. Ananda must be attributed not to the senses, but to pure wisdom. Contemplation by the self, of the self, brings one close to Purusha. Here the self is devoid of ego. It is said that the front of the brain is the analytical part, savitarka, while the back of the brain is the old, reasoning area, savikara. The base of the brain is the seat of ananda, and the crown of the head of the individual self, asmita. Sabija samadhi is achieved by drawing these 4 facets of the brain towards its stem. When this synchronization has been achieved, a transitory state of quietness, manolaya, is experienced. Then from the stem of the brain, consciousness is made to descend towards the source mind, the seat of the heart. Here it merges into a mindless, beginningless, endless state of being. Amanaskatva, or nirbija samadhi, meaning samadhi without seed or support. It is a conquest of the spirit. In between sabija and nirbija samadhis, Patanjali describes an intervening state, virama pratyaya, which others called asampragnata samadhi. It is a spiritual plateau, or manolaya, a transitory state or a resting place before one plunges into nirbija samadhi. Through practice and renunciation, each and every part of the man, the skin, the cells, the breath, the movements of thought, intelligence and reason, become acquainted with the self. This is sampragnata samadhi. The sadhaka's intelligence spreads evenly within and around his body, like the surface of a lake without ripples. Then he sees things clearly. In this sampragnata samadhi, or contemplation, the disparity between the seer and the seen remains. Take, for example, the performance of an asana, or movements of breath in pranayama. In the beginning, these are done at a physical level. As understanding deepens, the body is penetrated internally. Its movements are connected with the intelligence, and the asana is grasped as a single unit in all directions, front to back, top to bottom, side to side. It is absorbed and held by the body's intelligence for the soul to perceive. One learns that one's body is the bow, the asana is the arrow, and the target is the soul. When the asana is perfected, the target is struck. The field and the knower of the field are united. The logic and reasoning of the asana are fulfilled. The sadhaka, having lost the consciousness of the asana and of his body, is one with himself. His asana, his breath, his effort, and his very being are one with the millions of cells in his body. He has reached sasmita, the auspicious state of asmita. Patanjali generally addresses us at several levels at once, so it is not unreasonable to explain vitarka, vikara, ananda, and asmita in relation to asana. When we begin the practice of asana, our method is largely hit or miss. Let me try this, let me try that. It is a process of trial and error, based on conjecture. That is the nature of vitarka. It is adventurous rather than calculating, but it does not forget its errors. We then evolve to the stage we may call vikara, in which a body of experience has been built up from investigation, mature consideration, and dawning discrimination. As our asanas ripen, we reach a stage when skin consciousness moves toward the center of being, and the center radiates towards the periphery. Movement is at once centripetal and centrifugal. This integrity brings bliss, ananda. Finally, when the conscious mechanism by which we consider and perform asana comes to an end, the process reaches a resting point. The asana then rests only on the inner self, which is in poise. The only support is asmita. Sutra 1.18 Virammapatyaya Abhyasa Purava Samskara Shesha Anya. Virama means rest, repose, pause. Pratyaya means going towards, firm, conviction, reliance, confidence, usage, practice, a cause, instrument, means, device. Abhyasa means practice. Purva means before, old, previous, foregoing. Samskara shesha means balance of subliminal impressions. Anyaha means other, another, different. Viramya pratyaya abhyasa purava samskara shesha anya. The void arising in these experiences is another samadhi. Hidden impressions lie dormant, but spring up during moments of awareness, creating fluctuations and disturbing the purity of the consciousness. As mentioned earlier, Patanjali indicates another state of samadhi in between sabija samadhi and nirbija samadhi, but does not name it. It is experienced with the cessation of all functions of the brain, leaving behind only the residual merits or samskaras of good practices. In this state, one is free from passions, desires, and appetites. The word used for this state is virama pratyaya. In it, the sadhaka rests in a highly evolved state in which the intelligence is still. The nearest we come to virama pratyaya in ordinary experience are those few moments before falling asleep, when the intellect relaxes its hold on thoughts and objects, and the mind becomes silent, a state reminiscent of manolaya. Like a river joining the sea, the mind is dissolving into the self. We are given a momentary glimpse of the seer, abiding in the self. The moment one loses the feeling of I, one is in this state of virama pratyaya, which is neither negative nor positive. It is a state of suspended animation in the consciousness. Patanjali calls this state a different type of samadhi, anyaha. It is not deliberate, but natural. In deliberate or sampragnata samadhi, the intelligence dissolves, but the sense of self remains. The samskaras of good practices remain, and all other fluctuations cease. This state becomes a plateau from which the aspirant may climb further up the spiritual ladder. As it is only a transitional state, one must take care that stagnation does not set in. It should not be taken as the goal. One should then, in fact, intensify one's sadhana to reach the state of the absolute nirbija samadhi. In the next sutra it is said that those who remain in virama pratyaya not only conquer the elements of nature, but merge with them, while others live without a physical body as angels or devatas. We have the examples of Ramakrishna Paramahansa, Ramana Maharshi, and Sri Aurobindo, who remained in that state for a long period without the awareness of their bodies, but emerged later to reach nirbija samadhi. Such sadhakas are called prakriti layas. Laya is merged in nature, or videhins, meaning existing without a body. Other yogis who have reached a certain level of evolution in their search are caught at a crossroads, feeling that this is the end of their journey. If they stay there and do not attempt to go further in the practice of yoga, they fall from the grace of yoga. Lord Krishna calls such aspirants yoga bharashtas. In the Bhagavad Gita he says that those yogis who have fallen deliberately from the grace of yoga are reborn in the houses of the pure and prosperous, where they live a contented life in a righteous way for many years, while the others who have undeliberately fallen are reborn into the families of poor yogis who are endowed with wisdom. Then they strive again for perfection, beginning from the state which they have reached in the previous life. Virama pratyaya is a precarious state. It may bind the sadhaka forever, or it may uplift him. Patanjali advises in 1.20 that those who have reached virama pratyaya should not stop there, but should redouble their efforts with faith and courage, memory and contemplative awareness. Sri Vyasa, the first commentator on Patanjali, calls this redoubled effort upaya pratyaya. Upaya is the means by which one reaches one's aim, a stratagem. Through Upaya Pratyaya, the evolved souls mentioned above reach Nirbija Samadhi. Patanjali clearly uses the word sampragnata for the state of samadhi, which is reached through vitarka, vikara, ananda and asmita. In this sutra, he explains the deliberate maintenance of a thought-free state of consciousness. Hence, here he has not given a precise term, but uses the expression anya, meaning another or a different type of samadhi, and not asampragnata samadhi as conveyed by many commentators. Sutra 1.19 Bhava pratyaya videha prakritilayanam. Bhava means arising or produced from, originating in, state of being, existence, origin, true condition, real disposition. Pratyaya means going towards, firm conviction, usage, means, device. Videha means incorporeal, without material existence, but an existence in contemplation of a law, the law of nature and of the spirit. Prakriti Layanam means merged in nature. Bhava pratyaya videha pratilayanam. In this state, one may experience bodilessness or become merged in nature. This may lead to isolation or to a state of loneliness. In this samadhi, which is poised between sabija and nirbija samadhi, the sadhaka is freed from all fluctuations, but subliminal impressions, samskaras, spring to life the moment he comes out of that state. Some evolved entities move without a body, as spirits and angels, while others become absorbed in the elements of nature, prakriti. Caught in the web of bodiless feeling, or merging in nature, they forget to climb to the topmost rung of the spiritual ladder, and fail to reach nirbija samadhi. The sadhaka, having reached a state of isolation, but not emancipation, must come out of it if he is not to lose the path of kaivalya. A man who performs trance underground, without ventilation, becomes one with the earth. A person submerged in water becomes one with water. He is a prakriti layan, one with the elements. One whose spirit moves without a body is a videhan. When the prakriti layan is separated from earth or water, or the videhan comes in contact with his own body, subliminal impressions surface and create fluctuations in the mind. This experience is the conquest of the principles or tattvas of nature, prakriti jaya. In 1.10, Patanjali defines sleep as a state in which all thoughts and feelings are temporarily suspended and the senses, mind and intellect, and consciousness rest in the being. In dreamless sleep there is absence of everything. If an average person, when awake, recollects the state of dreamless sleep, he glimpses a non-physical state of existence, or videha, and also the state of merging in nature, prakriti laya. In sleep, these two phases remain unconscious until one wakes, whereas evolved souls in samadhi, as described in 1.18, experience them consciously. Sleep is a natural condition of consciousness. Samadhi is a superconscious state. In sleep, everything is inert, tamasic. In Samadhi, everything is luminous, untinged by the gunas. Sutra 1.20 Sharada Virya Smriti Samadhi Prajna Purvaka Itarasam. Shraddha means trust which comes from revelation, faith, confidence, reverence. Virya means vigor, physical and moral strength, mental power, energy, valor. Smriti means memory, recollection. Samadhi means profound meditation, supreme devotion, identification of the contemplator with the subject of contemplation, perfect absorption of thoughts. Prajna means awareness of real knowledge acquired through intense contemplation. Purvaka means previous, prior, first. Itarasam means another, rest, different from, whereas. Shraddha Virya Smriti Samadhi Prajna Purvakaitarasam. Practice must be pursued with trust, confidence, vigor, keen memory, and power of absorption to break this spiritual complacency. This sutra guides those advanced souls who have attained a certain level in Samadhi to intensify their sadhana with redoubled confidence, power, awareness, and devotion. Sage Vyasa calls this state Upaya Pratyaya. Highly evolved souls have the power to discriminate between isolation and emancipation. They are neither elated by their conquest of the elements, nor delighted at their ability to move freely without their bodies. They adopt new means to intensify their practice with faith and vigor, and use memory as a guide to leap forward with wisdom, total absorption, awareness, and attention. It is said in the Puranas that one Jada Bharata, having reached a state of Samadhi, became cold and unemotional. This is exactly what Patanjali means when he speaks of the intermediate state of Samadhi as Anya, or different. Jada Bharata took 3 lives to come out of that state, and then to proceed toward Nirbija Samadhi. Jada Bharata's father was a Rajasri by the name of Rashabha, who was a king of Bharata. His mother Jayavantyambika was a pious lady. Being the son of such noble hearts, he was more inclined towards spiritual knowledge than to ruling the country. He therefore made up his mind to renounce the kingdom and retired to the forest. One day, while he was bathing in a river, a pregnant doe came to drink. Frightened by a thunderous sound, it gave birth to a fawn and died. Jadabharata took pity on the fawn, carried it to the hermitage, and began tending it. He was so attached to it that even at his last breath he had only that deer in his thoughts. Hence he was reborn as a deer, but his previous sadhana remained as subliminal impressions. Later he was reborn as a human being in the house of a realized soul, Angirasa by name. He developed indifference to life and lived like a madman. One day the king of the country wanted to perform a human sacrifice for goddess Kalimata. He commanded his attendants to bring a human being for the sacrifice. With great difficulty they found a person who, however, escaped at the appointed time. The king, in a rage, sent his attendants to find another person. This time they chanced upon Jadabharata, who was moving around in the forest, unconcerned with life. He was brought for the sacrifice. As the king was about to kill him, goddess Kali Mata appeared in her real form, destroyed the king and his attendants, and set Jadabharata free. As a wandering sage, he moved to Sindh. The king of the country wanted to sit at the feet of sage Kapila to learn spiritual knowledge. One day, while he was traveling in a palanquin, his carrier spotted Jadabharata and called him for help. He unhesitatingly consented to oblige, but moved in such a way as to disturb the rhythm of the others. They began scolding him, to which he replied that their abuses could not touch his self, as they were meant for his body. Hearing this, the king was wonderstruck. He climbed down and humbly prostrated before the sage, asking his forgiveness. With a serene state of mind, Jadabharata accepted the king's humble request and moved on to continue his sadhana. He had taken 3 lives to resume his sadhana, from where he had left it. This story aptly illustrates how the 5 dynamic qualities of faith, tenacity, perfect memory, absorption and awareness are necessary to hold on to what one has attained, and to break out of that spiritual isolation which is not freedom. Buddha says in the Dharmapada that all sorrows can be conquered through good conduct, reverential faith, enthusiasm, remembrance, concentration, and right knowledge. Shraddha should not be understood simply as faith. It also conveys mental and intellectual firmness. The next word, virya, stands for valor and power, in the sense of physical and nervine strength. Interestingly, Patanjali's first use of the word Shraddha is explicitly to encourage the sadhaka to intensify his sadhana in order to reach the highest goal. The natural trust of the aspirant is confirmed by revelation, and transformed into the faith which permeates the consciousness of practitioners in any field of art, science, and philosophy. If trust is instinctive, faith is intuitional. After describing the experience of unbiased bliss and spiritual aura in 1.17 to 1.19, Patanjali here expresses this felt trust as Shraddha. Sutra 1.21 Tivra samveganam asana. Tivra means vehement, intense, severe, sharp, acute, supreme, poignant. Samveganam means those who are quick, cheerful. Samvega is a technical word like samyama. Asanaha means drawn near, approached, near in time, place or number. Tivra samveganam asanaha. The goal is near for those who are supremely vigorous and intense in practice. Samadhi is within reach for him who is honest and pure at heart, enthusiastic, intense, and supremely energetic. He quickly reaches the highest goal of yoga, aided also by his residual accumulated virtues. However, sometimes even an intense aspirant may become mild or average, slow or moderate in his practice. In the Shiva Samhita, chapter 5.16, aspirants are categorized as feeble or mrudu, moderate or madhyama, sharp in understanding and vigorous, that's adhimatra, and having colossal energy and supreme enthusiasm, adhimatratma. Sutra 1.22. Mrudu madhya adhimatravat tatta api vishesha. Mrudu means soft, feeble, mild, fickle. Madhya means middle, intermediate, moderate, average. Adhimatravat means ardent, steady-minded, keen. Tatta means thence, further. Api means also, and Vishesha means differentiation. Mrudu madhya atrimatravat tatta api vishesha. There are differences between those who are mild, average, and keen in their practices. Sadhakas are of different levels of eagerness and intensity. For them, the goal is time-bound, depending on their level. This sutra further amplifies the distinction between yogis whose practices are feeble, average, or keen, and who progress according to the level of their practice. These types can be further subdivided. For example, a keen sadhaka may be feebly, moderately, or intensely keen. Similar subdivisions can be made of the average and feeble types. The goal of yoga is near or far according to one's eagerness and one's efforts. This sutra refers to the different aptitudes of yogic practitioners. But if Sutras 1.14 to 22 are examined as a group, it is clear that they refer to 9 types of yogis who are highly evolved and whose standards of intelligence are far above ordinary human standards. They are of an ascending order of intensity. Paravairagya means supreme detachment, and is for those who are clear of head and pure of heart, heroic and supremely energetic, that is adhimatra atman or tivra samevegan. For these the goal is at hand. For others it is time-bound. Levels of sadhakas and types of awareness. If the sadhaka is mrudu or mild, the awareness is 1. Vitarka prajna, which means intellectual analysis at the external level, or 2. Vikara prajna, which is subtle differentiating knowledge and mental alertness. If the sadhaka is madhya, meaning medium, the type of awareness is ananda prajna, meaning knowledge of bliss, or asmita prajna, meaning knowledge of the self. If the sadhaka is at adhimatra, meaning intense, the level of awareness is vasikara prajna, meaning subjugation of desire, or virama pratyaya, meaning cessation of brain functions. Bhava pratyaya means mental quietness, and upaya pratyaya means skillful means. If the sadhaka is at level tivra samivegan or adhimatra atman, meaning supremely intense, the awareness is paravairagya, meaning supreme detachment. Sutra 1.23. Ishvara pranidhanatva. Ishvara means the Lord, God, and universal soul. Pranidhanat means by profound religious meditation contemplation, prayer, renunciation of the fruits of actions. Va means or. Ishvara pranidhanatva, or the chitta may be restrained by profound meditation upon God and total surrender to Him. To contemplate on God, to surrender one's self to Him, is to bring everything face to face with God. Pranidhana is the surrender of everything, one's ego, all good and virtuous actions, pains and pleasures, joys and sorrows, elations and miseries to the universal soul. Through surrender, the aspirant's ego is effaced, and the grace of the Lord pours down upon him like torrential rain. Sutra 1.24. Klesha karma vipaka asayai aparamrsta purusha vishesha ishvara. Klesha means affliction, pain, distress, pain from disease. Karma means act, action, performance. Vipaka means ripe, mature, result. Asayai means seat, abode, reservoir. Aparamrsta means untouched, unaffected, in no way connected. Purusha Vishesha means a special person, a distinct Purusha, or being. Ishvara means God. Klesha karma vipaka asai aparamsta Purusha Vishesha Ishvara. God is the Supreme Being, totally free from conflicts, unaffected by actions, and untouched by cause and effect. God is a special, unique entity, or Purusha, who is eternally free from afflictions and unaffected by actions and their reactions, or by their residue. Ishvara is the Supreme Soul, the Lord of all and Master of everything. He is untouched by kleshas, or afflictions, unaffected by the fruits of actions, abiding undisturbed in His own being. He is eternally free and always sovereign. Human beings experience pain before reaching emancipation, but God is always detached from pain and pleasure, sorrow and joy, dejection and elation. God is ever free, but man has to wash away all his subliminal impressions before realizing freedom. There is a difference between Purusha, meaning individual soul, and Purusha Vishesha, meaning universal soul. As God is distinct from the individual soul, He is called Ishvara. Sutra 1.25. Tatra nirasitayam sarvagnya bijam. Tatra means therein, in Him. Nirasitayam means matchless, unsurpassed, unrivaled. Sarvagnya means all-knowing, omniscient, all-wise. Bijam means a seed, source, cause, origin, beginning. Tatra niratisayam sarvagnya bijam. God is the unexcelled seed of all knowledge. In Him abides the unrivaled, matchless source of all knowledge. He is the seed of omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence. In God rests all creation. He is eternal and one. He is Himself the seed of all knowledge, the seed of omniscience, whereas the yogi attains infinite knowledge, but not the seed of that knowledge. Sutra 1.26 Saisha puruvesham api guru kalena vachedat. Sa means that. Esha means Purusha or God. Puruvesham means first, foremost. Api means also, to, besides, in addition to. Guru means master, preceptor. Kalena means time. Anavachedat means unbounded, unlimited, uninterrupted, undefined, continuous. Saisha purvesham api guru kalena vachedat. God is the first, foremost, and absolute Guru, unconditioned by time. This spiritual Purusha, the Supreme Spirit, is the first and foremost teacher, neither bound nor conditioned by place, space, or time. He is all, and all is He. Sutra 1.27 Tasya vachaka pranavaha. Tasya means him. Vachaka means connoting, denoting, signifying, sign, indicating. Pranava means the sacred symbol Aum. Tasya vachaka pranava. He is represented by the sacred syllable Aum, called Pranava. He is identified with the sacred symbol Aum. He is represented in Aum. Aum is considered to be the symbol of divinity. It is a sacred mantra and is to be repeated constantly. Aum is called Pranava, which stands for praise of the divine and fulfillment of divinity. Sound is vibration, which, as modern science tells us, is at the source of all creation. God is beyond vibration, but vibration, being the subtlest form of His creation, is the nearest we can get to Him in the physical world. So we take it as His symbol. The impersonal essence and source of all being is known as Hiranyagarbha, meaning golden womb. It is also known as Brahman, who is within each heart. Aum is the bow, and the self is the arrow. With deep concentration, the aspirant has to hit the target, Brahman, so that the individual self and the universal soul become one. Aum is composed of 3 syllables, A, U, M. The word is written thus, Aum. Without these 3 sounds, no words can begin, resound, or end in any language. These 3 sounds are universal. They are the seed or bija of all words. The letters A, U, and M symbolize speech, or vak, mind, or manas, and breath of life, or prana. As leaves are held together by a twig, all speech is held together by Aum. Aum is the everlasting spirit, a symbol of serenity, divinity, majestic power, omnipotence, and universality. The three letters of Om represent the three genders, the three gunas, the three aspects of time, past, present, and future, and the three gurus, the mother, the father, and the preceptor. They also represent the triad of divinity, Brahma the creator, Vishnu the sustainer, and Shiva the destroyer of the universe. Om, as a whole, stands for the realization that liberates the human spirit from the confines of body, mind, intellect, and ego. By meditating upon Om, the sadhaka remains steady, pure, and faithful. He becomes a great soul, or Mahatma. He finds the presence of the Supreme Spirit within and earns the peace which is free from fear, dissolution, and death. Sutra 1.28 Tachapa Tadartha Bhavanam. That means that, or Aum. Japa means muttering in an undertone, whispering, repeating. Tadartha Bhavanam means its aim, its purpose, its meaning with feeling, its identification. Tachapa Tadartha Bhavanam. The mantra Om is to be repeated constantly with feeling, realizing its full significance. Constant reverential repetition of the pravana Om with contemplation on its meaning and the feeling it evokes helps the seer to reach the highest state in yoga. Words, meaning, and feeling are interwoven. As words are eternal, so are meaning and feeling. Meaning and feeling change according to one's intellectual caliber and understanding. This sutra conveys the devotional aspects of the seed mantra Om. Japa is repetition of the mantra with reverence and realization of its meaning. Practice of japa unites the perceiver, the instruments of perception, and the perceived, God. The mantra Om is considered to be Sabda Brahman, meaning word of God or universal sound, to be known with the organs of perception and action, mind, intelligence, and conscience. Sutra 1.29 Tata pratyak chetana adigama api ataraya abhavascha. Tata means then. Pratyak chetana means individual soul, introspective mind. Adhigama means to find, discover, accomplish, acquire mastery. Api means also or to. Antarya means intervention, interference, impediment, hindrance, obstacle. Abhava means absence, and cha means and. Tata pratyak chetana adhigama api antarya abhava cha. Meditation on God with the repetition of Om removes obstacles to the mastery of the inner self. The repetition of the pranava mantra with feeling and understanding of its meaning leads to the discovery of the self and helps to remove impediments to self-realization. When experience, the instruments of experience, and the object experienced are interwoven, the soul manifests itself without the intervention of any impediments. Sutra 1.30 Vyadhisthana samshaya pramada alasya avirati branti dharshana ala bhumi karva avasti tatvani chitta vikshepsa te antarya. Vyadhi means disease. Sthana means lack of perseverance, lack of interest, sluggishness, mental laziness. Samshaya means doubt, indecision. Pramada means intoxication, carelessness, negligence, inattentiveness, inadvertence. Alasya means idleness, physical laziness. Avirati means incontinence, lacking in moderation or control, sensual gratification. Bhranti Dharshana means living under illusion or mistaken notion. Alabdhabhumikatva means missing the point, inability to hold on to what is achieved, disappointment in one's desired object. Anavastitatvani means an unsettled state, inability to maintain the achieved progress. Chitta vikshepsa means a scattered or oscillating mind, causing distraction in the consciousness. Te means these. Antaraya means obstacles or impediments. Vyadhisthana samshaya pramada alasya avirati bhranti darshana alabhumi karva avastitvani chitta vikshepsa te antarya. These obstacles are disease, inertia, doubt, heedlessness, laziness, indiscipline of the senses, erroneous views, lack of perseverance, and backsliding. This sutra describes the 9 obstacles or impediments which obstruct progress and distract the aspirant's consciousness. These obstacles can be divided into physical, mental, intellectual, and spiritual. The physical are disease and lack of interest or sluggishness. The mental are lingering doubt, pride or carelessness, idleness, and false gratification. The intellectual is living in a world of delusion, and the spiritual, lack of perseverance or not being able to hold on to what has been undertaken, inability to maintain the progress attained due to pride or stagnation in practices. In Sutra 1.29, Patanjali indicates that self-realization is possible only when consciousness is free from impediments. Sutra 1.31 Dukkha daurmanasya angamejayatva svashapravshasa vikshepa sahabhuva. Dukkha means sorrow, pain, grief, distress, unhappiness. Daurmanasya means mental pain, affliction, dejection, despair. Angamejayatva means unsteadiness of the body. Swashaprashavasa means inspiration and expiration. Vikshepa means scattered, causing distraction. Sahabhuva means existing at the same time, side by side, accompanying, concurrent. Dukkha daurmanasya angamejayatva svashapravashasa vikshepa sahabhuva. Sorrow, despair, unsteadiness of the body, and irregular breathing further distract the chitta. Besides the obstacles mentioned in 1.30, there are 4 more causes of distraction: sorrow, despair or evil disposition, tremor of the body, and irregular or labored breathing. Possibly labored breathing shakes the body, creating instability, which in turn brings mental distress. These cause further distractions, which agitate the mind and consciousness. These impediments are of three types: self-inflicted or adhyatmika, imbalances of elements in the body or adhibhautika, and problems brought about by fate, for example, genetic defects, that's adhidaivika. They need to be fought and conquered through yogic disciplines. Sutra 1.32 Tat pratishedharatam ekatattva abhyasa. Tat pratishedharatam means for their prevention. Eka means one, single. Tattva means a real state, reality, truth, essential nature, the very essence, a principle, a doctrine. Abhyasa means practice. Tat pratishedharatam ekatattva abhyasa. Adherence to single-minded effort prevents these impediments. To remove the 13 impediments and prevent their recurrence, several specific methods have been described. Though most commentators have concluded that ekatattva is devotion and surrender to God, it is beyond the average person's comprehension that surrender to God is the cure for all maladies. If surrender to God were possible for everyone, and could by itself eradicate all impediments, Patanjali need not have elaborated on all the other means of reaching the divine state. Only a few outstanding personalities like Ramana Maharshi and Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Mahatma Gandhi, Jada Bharata, and the great acharyas of the past could surrender wholeheartedly to God, as they were angels in human form, highly evolved souls whose subliminal impressions from previous lives enabled them to assume their final human form in order to clear up the residues. But total surrender to God is beyond the abilities of most ordinary men and women, who are still caught up in pleasure and pain, joy and sorrow, success and failure. Meditation undoubtedly helps to minimize the mental agitations of such persons, but to conquer all the obstacles to self-realization, all the 8 stages of yoga must be followed. Only when the body, mind, and intelligence are fully purified is it possible to totally surrender to God without expecting any return. This is a surrender of the highest order, beyond the capacity of the average individual. Sutra 1.33 Maitri Karuna Mudaita Upekshanam Sukha Dukkha Punya Apunya Vishayanam Bhavanata Chitta Prashadanam. Maitri means friendliness. Karuna means compassion or mercy. Mudaita means gladness, joy. Upekshanam means to be indifferent and apathetic, to look at things without interest. Sukha means happiness. Dukkha means sorrow. Punya means virtue. Apunya means vice. Vishayanam means regarding an object, concerning a thing. Bhavanata means conception, remembrance, infusion, recollection, thoughtfulness. Chitta Prashadanam means graceful diffusion of the consciousness, favorable disposition. Maitri karuna mudita apekshanam sukha dukkha punya apunya vishayanam bhavanata chitta prasadanam. Through cultivation of friendliness, compassion, joy, and indifference to pleasure and pain, virtue and vice respectively, the consciousness becomes favorably disposed, serene and benevolent. These qualities keep the mind in a state of well-being. Patanjali here lays the groundwork for our journey towards self-realization. Chitta vikshepa is a current of disturbed thoughts running like a river. In chitta prasadana, graceful diffusion, the turbulent flow is dammed up and consciousness diffuses calmly like a lake. If the chitta is caught in the web of the senses and the sadhaka fails to cultivate friendliness, compassion, delight and equanimity, sorrow and unhappiness arise in his heart. This sutra asks us to rejoice with the happy and to be compassionate with the sorrowful, friendly to the virtuous and indifferent to those who continue to live in vice despite attempt to change them. This mental adjustment builds social as well as individual health. Besides cultivating these qualities, one should follow the social virtues of yama for the well-being of society as a whole. This approach to life keeps the mind of the sadhaka serene and pure. Sutra 1.34 Prachardana Vidharanabhyam va pranasya. Prachardana means emitting, sending forth, discharging, expelling, exhalation. Vidharanabhyam means restraining, maintaining, supporting, executing. Va means or, an option, also the power of choosing correctly, selection, alternatively. Pranasya means off breath. Prachardana vidharanabhyam va pranasya, or by maintaining the pensive state felt at the time of soft and steady exhalation and during passive retention after exhalation. Another possibility of diffusing consciousness is the attainment of that serene state by retention of breath after exhalation. In this and the following 5 sutras, 1.34 to 1.39, several alternative methods of calming the mind and preparing it for spiritual evolution are described. One should inhale and exhale slowly and pause, maintaining the retention for as long as is comfortable. This practice ensures a state of consciousness which is like a calm lake. Sutra 1.35 Vishayavati va pravritti utpanna manasa sthiti nibandhani. Vishayavati means related to, attached to object, that which is perceived. Va means or. Pravritti means moving onwards, advancing, progressing, contemplating, devoting, applying. Utpanna means born, produced, acquired, accomplished. Manasa means mind. Sthiti means state. Nibandhani means origin, basis, foundation, binding together. Vishayavati va pravritti utpana manasastiti nibandhani. Or, by contemplating an object that helps to maintain steadiness of mind and consciousness, one may equally attain an exalted state of consciousness by becoming totally engrossed with dedication and devotion in an object of interest. The practice of contemplating upon an object is the foundation of mental stability. Total absorption in the object brings about direct perception of its essence. This sutra shows how to develop awareness and sensitivity in intelligence. In doing so, one may gain insight into the phenomena of nature, prakriti, as well as into the nature of the seer, purusha. Sutra 1.36 Vishoka va jyotishmati. Vishoka means free from grief, sorrowless, effulgent light. Va means or. Jyotismati means luminous, bright, shining, possessed of luminous bodies, a tranquil state of mind. Vishoka va jyotismati, or inner instability is gained by contemplating a luminous, sorrowless, effulgent light. Here the concentration is on the innermost core of the heart, wherein alone the sorrowless, effulgent light glows. That is the seat of the soul. The mind is guided in such a way that it becomes engrossed and penetrates towards its source. Movements in the form of thoughts in the mind are the waves, and chitta, or the seat of consciousness, is the ocean. The sadhaka must learn to keep the chitta motionless and thoughtfully silent, without creating waves of thought. This effort of stilling and silencing the chitta brings forth the sorrowless, effulgent light of the soul. Sutra 1.37 Vitaraga Vishayam Va Chitam. Vita means devoid of, free from. Raga means desire, passion, love, affection. Vishayam means an object. Va means or. Chittam means consciousness. Vitaraga Vishayam Va Chittam. Or, by contemplating on enlightened sages who are free from desires and attachments, calm and tranquil, or by contemplating divine objects. Vyasa, Shuka, Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva, Vallabha, Chaitanya, Sri Aurobindo, Ramana Maharshi, and Sri Ramakrishna are examples of men of illumination. If the sadhaka reflects on the serene, pure state of such divine persons and emulates their practices, he gains confidence, attains stability, and develops a desireless state of mind. In the same way, one can also contemplate each stage of an asana, or each movement of breath, in order to bring the chitta to a state of desirelessness. If consciousness is kept free from desire, it becomes pure. Mere withdrawal from the world does not in itself achieve this aim. Sutra 1.38 Swapna Nidra Jnana Alambanam Va. Swapna means a dream state, a state of delusion. Nidra means sleep state. Jnana means wakeful state, awareness, intelligent state. Alambanam means support, base, dependence or resting upon, assistance, help, distinguishing the gross from the eternal. Va means or. Swapna nidra jnana alambanam va. Or by recollecting and contemplating the experiences of dream-filled or dreamless state during a watchful waking state. Chitta has 4 planes: the unconscious, the subconscious, conscious, and superconscious. The unconscious plane is the state of dreamless sleep, nidra. The subconscious plane is the dream-filled or swapana state. The conscious plane is the waking or jagrata state. The superconscious plane is the 4th state, known as turiya. Turiya is samadhi, the final state wherein the individual soul, or jivatman, is merged with the universal soul, or paramatman. By close examination of dream-filled and dreamless sleep, the sadhaka comes to distinguish the various levels of consciousness and learns to transform them into a single state of consciousness. The sadhaka should also contemplate on the thought of the soul before going to sleep, so that the same thought flows uninterruptedly whether he is awake, dreaming, or asleep. This supports progress toward the attainment of spiritual bliss. In Sutra 3.11 and 12, Patanjali explains kasaya, meaning waning, chitta, santa, meaning calm, chitta, and udaya, meaning rising, chitta. These may be compared to swapna, nidra, and jagrata states. Normally, declining thoughts lead to quietness, but strong rising thoughts keep one awake. A yogi maintains passive alertness without allowing thoughts to spring forth, or strives to restrain them. This is reflective contemplation. The sadhaka begins his sadhana dreaming of the pros and cons of each asana. This is a swapna state. He stabilizes his ideas and rests on them. This is nidra state. Later, he learns to distinguish the subtle points and perform them with awareness. This is the state of jnana. Sutra 1.39 Yattha bhimata dhyanatva. Yattha bhimata means that which is desirable, a selected thing, a pleasing thing, according to one's wish or taste. Dhyanat means by meditation, and va means or. Yattha bhimata dhyanatva, or by meditating on any desired object conducive to steadiness of consciousness. The final method is to choose an object conducive to meditation, not one which is externally pleasing, but auspicious and spiritually uplifting. Practicing this simple method of one-pointed attention, the sadhaka gradually develops the art of contemplation. Later, when a degree of mental stability is attained, he will be able to meditate on any object at will. The perfect performance of an asana is pleasing, and through it, one can gain serenity. On the face of it, this sutra is simple. It describes meditation on a pleasing object. Its deeper hidden meaning is harder to comprehend. Having explained various methods of meditation with support, Patanjali now comes to subjective meditation. The most pleasing object of meditation is in fact one's very existence, the core of the being. Patanjali advises us to trace the seed of that core, the living spirit that pervades everything from the most infinitesimal particle to the infinitely greatest. This is the most difficult subject to meditate upon. This is the last of the 6 alternative methods of stilling the mind and consciousness. This group of sutras shows that Patanjali's teaching was broad-based, enabling people of all creeds and walks of life to aspire to life's spiritual goal. Sutra 1.40 Param manu param mamahatvanta asya vaishakara. Paramanu means an infinitesimal particle, an atom. Paramamahatvanta means most distant, most excellent, highest, best, greatest. Asya means of this. Vashikara means bringing into subjugation, having mastery over passions, or in one's power. Paramanu paramamahatvanta asya vashikara. Mastery of contemplation brings the power to extend from the finest particle to the greatest. By following the various alternative methods of contemplation described above, the sadhaka develops the power to penetrate from the most infinitesimal particles to infinity. The sadhaka is not only freed from all disturbances of the mind, he has also subjugated his consciousness and mastered his passions. His consciousness reaches a height of purity in which it develops the power of penetrating objects from the minutest atoms to the mighty cosmos. This sutra describes how the ordinary mind is transformed into a supermind, able to penetrate the boundless regions of space and the deepest regions within. Stages in the purification of citta. From Sutra 1.33, the method is cultivating appropriate attitudes. The limbs of yoga associated with this are yama, niyama, and asana. The elements of prakriti associated with this are behavior or achara, character or silam, organs of action or kamendriyas, organs of perception or jnanendriyas, mind or manas. From Sutra 1.34, the method is breath control. The limb of yoga associated with this is pranayama. The element of prakriti associated with this is breath or prana. From Sutra 1.35, the method is absorption in object. The limb of yoga is pratyahara. The element of prakriti is senses of perception and mind. From Sutra 1.36, the method is contemplation of inner light. The limb of yoga is dharana, and element of prakriti is mind or manas. From Sutra 1.37, the method is contemplation of sages. The limb of yoga is dharana, and element of prakriti is ego or I consciousness, ahamkara. These are all objective meditations. Subjective meditations. From Sutra 1.38, the method is recollection of dreams and sleep. The limb of yoga is dharana, and elements of prakriti, consciousness or chitta. From Sutra 1.39, the method is meditation on any desired object. The limb of yoga is dhyana, and element of prakriti, the antakarana or soul. Sutra 1.41. Shina vritti abhijatsaya eva mane gratir grahana grahyeso tatsya tadanjanata samapati. Shina means dissolving of the sattva, rajo and tammo gunas. Vritti means modifications or fluctuations. Abhijatsaya means inborn, noble, courteous, polite, worthy, learned, distinguished, wise or transparent. Eva means like. Mannehe means a gem, a flawless crystal. Grahitr means knower, taker, perceiver, one who has comprehended. Grahna means an act of seizing, catching, accepting, grasping, instrument of cognition. Grahyesu means to be known. Tatstha means becoming stable. Tadanjanata means acquiring or taking the shape of the seen or known. Samapati means transformation, assuming the original form, consummation, completion, or conclusion. Shina vritti abhijatsaya eva mane gratir grahana grayesu tatsta tadanjanata samapati. The yogi realizes that the knower, the instrument of knowing, and the known are one, himself, the seer. Like a pure transparent jewel, he reflects an unsullied purity. With refinement, the consciousness becomes highly sensitive, choiceless, stainless and pure. The perceiver, the instrument of perception, and the perceived object, clearly reflected, are nothing but the seer. Like an object reflected flawlessly in a clean mirror, the perceiver, the perceived, and the instrument are reflected as one. This transparent reflecting quality of consciousness is termed samapati, which means assumption of the original form of the seer. Patanjali's description of samapati underlies the subtle distinction between yoga, samadhi, and samapati. Yoga is the employment of the means to reach samadhi. Samadhi is profound meditation, total absorption. Samapati is the balanced state of mind of the seer who, having attained samadhi, radiates his own pure state. Yoga and samadhi, in other words, can be regarded as practices. Samapati, the state towards which they lead. When all fluctuations of mind's sattvic, rajasic and tamasic nature reach an end, mind ceases to gather and transmit information, and chitta is like the still, clear water of a calm lake. It transforms itself to the level of the seer, and reflects its purity without refraction. Like a transparent jewel, it becomes at once the knower, the instrument of knowing, and the object known. Thus the sadhaka experiences the true state of the soul. Samapati is enshrined in Abhijatmani, which means flawless jewel. Chitta is now a flawless jewel. A hungry or a thirsty person needs only food or water. Hunger and thirst are necessities of life. Their demands are instinctive and instantaneous. Emotions such as lust, anger, greed, infatuation, pride and hatred are not instinctive, but are imbibed through contact with the external world. Yet in man they are reflected in their totality. Truthfulness, purity, and a loving nature are intuitive and are also fully expressed in man. By yogic discipline and contemplation, the sadhaka develops these intuitive qualities of purity and truthfulness, and realizes the flawless quality of consciousness. Through it he becomes the seer, and transmits rays of wisdom through his words, thoughts, and actions. Sutra 1.42 Tatra Shabda Artha Jnana Vikalpai Sankirna Savitarka Samapati. Tatra means there. Shabda means word. Artha means purpose, aim, meaning. Jnana means knowing, knowledge, intelligence. Vikalpai means an option, imagination, the act of allowing a rule to be observed or not as one pleases. Samise, the carrying out of a transaction upon stipulated terms. Sankirna means poured together, mixed together, strewn, intermingled. Savitarka means becoming totally engrossed, thoughtful. Samapati means transformation. Tatra Shabda Artha Jnana Vikalpai Sankirna Savitarka Samapati. At this stage, called Savitarka Samapati, the word, meaning, and content are blended and become special knowledge. In the refined state of consciousness, words and their meanings are simultaneously and harmoniously blended with understanding, so that consciousness becomes engrossed in a new kind of knowledge. This is Savitarka Samapati. Sutra 1.43 Smriti Parishuddhau Swarupa Shunya Eva Artha Matra Nirbhasa Nirvitarka. Smriti means memory. Parishuddhau means completely cleansed, purest of minds. Swarupa Shunya means devoid of one's nature. Aiva means as it were. Arthamatta Nirbhasa means shining alone in its purest form. Nirvitarka means unreflecting, unconsidered, without analysis or logic. Smriti Shuddhau Swarupa Shunyaiva Arthamatra Nirbhasa Nirvitarka. In Nirvitarka Samapati, the difference between memory and intellectual illumination is disclosed. Memory is cleansed and consciousness shines without reflection. When memory is completely cleansed and purified, mind too is purified. Both cease to function as distinct entities. A no-mind state is experienced, and consciousness alone manifests itself, shining unblemished without reflection of external objects. This is called Nirvitarka Samapati. Memory is the recollection of past thoughts and experiences. It is the storehouse of past impressions. Its knowledge is reflected knowledge. The sadhaka should be aware that memory has tremendous impact on intelligence. By perseverance in yoga practices and persistent self-discipline, new experiences surface. These new experiences, free from the memories of the past, are fresh, direct, and subjective. They expunge what is remembered. Then memory ceases to function as a separate entity. It either merges with consciousness or takes a back seat, giving predominance to new experiences and bringing clarity in intelligence. For the average person, memory is a past mind. For the enlightened man, memory is a present mind. As memory is purified, intelligence becomes illuminative and moves closer to the seer, losing its identity. This is nirvitarka samapatti. Even for the unripe mind, there is a right and a wrong use of memory. It is not for recollecting pleasure, but for establishing a fund of experience as a basis for further correct action and perception. In asana, for example, we start with trial and error. The fruits of these experiments are graded by the discriminating intelligence and stored in the memory. As we progress, trial and error decreases and correct perception increases. So memory provides foresight against error. In the headstand, for example, something that usually goes wrong in that the upper arm shortens. Memory warns us, be aware before it happens. Discriminating experiment awakens consciousness. Awareness with discrimination and memory breaks down bad habits, which are repeated actions based on wrong perception, and replaces them with their opposite. In this process, the brain must be creative, not mechanical. The mechanical brain questions only the external phenomena, bringing objective knowledge. The creative brain calls into question the inner and outer, bringing subjective and spiritual knowledge. In asana, understanding begins with the inner skin. In pranayama, with the inner membrane of the nose. These are the starting points of the spiritual quest in asana and pranayama. In this way, a virtuous character is built up. When awareness is linked to intelligence, honesty comes into being. When brain and body move in harmony, there is integrity. In all this long process of tapas, memory supports the building up process. When memory functions perfectly, it becomes one with the intelligence. At this point, memory, which had originally dug for us so many pits, has transformed itself into our true guru. Sutra 1.44 Etayaiva savikara nirvikara sa shukshma vyasa vyakata. Etaya means by this. Eva means also. Savikara means reflection, deliberation, consideration, investigation. Nirvikara means without reflection, not needing any consideration. Sa means and. Sukshma Vaishya means subtle object, subtle thing. Vyakata means related, explained, expounded, commented upon. Etayava savikara nirvikara cha shukshma vaisya vyakata. The contemplation of subtle aspects is similarly explained as deliberate, that's savikara samapatti, or non-deliberate, nirvikara samapatti. transformation of the consciousness by contemplation on subtle objects such as the ego, ahamkara, intelligence, buddhi, or the counterpart of the elements, that is, sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell, or the qualities of luminosity, vibrancy, and dormancy of nature, conditioned by space, time, and causation, is savikara samapatti. Without these reflections, it becomes nirvikara samapatti. In nirvikara samapatti, the sadhaka experiences a state without verbal deliberation. All the subtle objects reflected in savikara are extinguished. He is free from memory, free from past experiences, devoid of all past impressions. This new state of contemplation is without cause and effect, place or time. The inexpressible states of pure bliss, ananda, and pure self, sashmita, rise to the surface and are experienced by the sadhaka. Sutra 1.45 Shukshma Vaisyatvam Chalinga Paryavasanam. Sukshma Vaisyatvam means subtle objects. Cha means and. Alinga means having no characteristic mark, unmanifested form. Paryavasanam means ending. Sukshma Visayatvam Chalinga Parvyasanam. The subtlest level of nature, prakriti, is consciousness. When consciousness dissolves in nature, it loses all marks and becomes pure. By exploring the subtle particles of nature, the consciousness reaches its goal. It is a state of complete cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. That is the subtle, infinitesimal intelligence, mahat, of nature, prakriti. Prakriti is the original or natural form of anything, nature, alinga, unmanifested form. Pradhana is primary or original matter, the first evolved or source of the material world, that which is placed or set before, chief or principal thing. These are all susceptible to change, whereas the soul, Purusha, is changeless. The subtlest of the infinitesimal principles of nature is the cosmic intelligence, Mahat, which in the individual is transformed as the I in a dynamic, minute form called Asmita, or the small self. Though the self does not change, the small self brings about changes in a human being due to the influence of nature's qualities. The body is made up of the particles of Prakriti, from its outermost sheath, the body, to the innermost core, the deep self. When the individual self, the I, is quietened by yogic practices, Prakriti has reached its end and merges into the self. This is subjective experience, or subjective knowledge. The sadhaka attains purity in buddhi and ahamkara, the infinitesimal source or apex of nature, mula prakriti. Here the sadhaka has reached the crossroads of self-realization. Sutra 1.46 Ta eva sabija samadhi. Ta means they. Eva means only. Sabija means with seed. Samadhi means profound meditation or absorption. Ta eva sabija samadhi. The states of samadhi described in the previous sutras are dependent upon a support or seed and are termed sabija. The savitarka, nirvitarka, savikara, nirvikara, sananda and sashmita samadhis are known as sabija samadhis. meaning seeded or with seed. All the states of Samapati described in Sutras 1.17 to 1.19 and 1.42 to 1.45 are seeded samadhis. All these samadhis are dependent upon an object which includes the intelligence, buddhi, and the I principle, asmita. Their seed is the core of the being, the only seedless seat in each individual. It is interesting to note that the 6 samapatis mentioned so far belong to the functions of the brain. The source of analysis, or savitarka, or absence of analysis, that's nirvitarka, is the frontal brain. For investigation and examination, that's savikara, or absence of them, nirvikara, the source is the back brain. The source of joy, or ananda, is the base of the brain, and of individuality, or asmita, the top of the brain. Through the disciplines of yoga, the sadhaka transforms his attention from the gross to the subtle. When he reaches the apex of nature, the brain being a part of nature, he attains perfection in controlling the modes of consciousness. He is able to stop all functions of the brain, deliberate and non-deliberate, at will. That is why it is termed samadhi with seed. Whatever is dependent on nature for contemplation is seeded samapati. The contemplation of the seer, who is the source of all seeds, is without support. Though both seer and nature are eternal, nature is changeable, while the seer remains the same, immutable, not dependent on any support except his own self. That is why contemplation of the seer is seedless or supportless, nirbija samadhi. Another state of samadhi, coming between sabija and nirbija, has been discussed by Patanjali in Sutra 1.18. Like the petals of the lotus, which unfold as the sun rises and close as it sets, the petals of the brain retreat from the periphery to its source, its stem or bud, and all its functions cease. This is commonly called asampragnata samadhi. It is the threshold between sabija and nirbija samadhi. If the sadhaka remains on the threshold, he merely conquers the elements. If he falls back, he is caught in pleasures and pains. If he crosses over, he attains freedom and beatitude. Sutra 1.47 Nirvichara Vaisaryad Adhyamat Prasada. Nirvichara means non-reflection, or reflection without seeds. Vaisaryade means skillfulness, profound knowledge, undisturbed pure flow. Adhyatma means supreme soul, manifested as an individual soul, the relation between the supreme and the individual soul. Prasada means clearness, brightness, lucidity, serenity of disposition. Nirvichara Vaisaryade Adhyatma Prasada. From proficiency in Nirvichara Samapati comes purity. Sattva or luminosity flows undisturbed, kindling the spiritual light of the self. When intelligence and consciousness, the essence of man, remain non-reflective, profound and unconditioned, the vehicles of the soul, the anatomical body, the organs of action, the senses of perception, the mind, intelligence and consciousness are illumined. Knowledge and understanding of the real state of the soul, manifest in luminosity. Sutra 1.48 Ratambhara Tatra Prajna. Ratambhara means upholding truth, full of truth, full of intellectual essence. Tatra means therein. Prajna means faculty of insight, wisdom. Ratambhara Tatra Prajna. When consciousness dwells in wisdom, a truth-bearing state of direct spiritual perception dawns. This earned spiritual illumination is filled with unalloyed wisdom, glowing with truth and reality. This luminosity of the soul manifests, shining with full fragrance. Ratambhara Prajna is a state of seasoned intelligence, or mature wisdom accompanied with intense insight. Sutra 1.49 Shrutta Anumana Prajna Abhyam Anya Vishaya Visheshartatva. Shruta means heard, listened, ascertained. Anumana means inference, conjecture. Prajnabhyam means from the wisdom of insight. Anya Vishaya means other object. Vishesha means peculiar, distinguishing between, special property. Artatva means object, purpose, aim, end. Shrutta Anumana Prajnabhyam Anya Vishaya Vishartatva. This truth-bearing knowledge and wisdom is distinct from and beyond the knowledge gained from books, testimony, or inference. Truth-bearing knowledge is first-hand, intuitive knowledge. This wisdom is gained through insight. It is a special, direct knowledge, arising from the soul, not from the perception of the senses or from the ordinary intellect. Hence it has a peculiar property of its own. The knowledge that springs from one's inner self is intuitive knowledge. It is also known as listening to the inner voice. It is instructive to compare this sutra with Sutra 1.7, in which Patanjali says that one's perception should be verified by logic and measured by traditional and spiritual lore. Now approaching the end of this chapter, the sadhaka may be judged to be of a ripe and cultured mind. His perceptions have an independent validity, requiring no verification from other sources. An ordinary man has free will, in the sense that he experiences choice and must find his way by discrimination. The enlightened sadhaka, having left duality behind him, experiences only his own will, which transcends the hesitations of choice. This is the intelligence of sattva in sattva. Sutra 1.50 Taja samskara anya samskara pratibandhi. Taja means born or sprung from, Ratambhara Prajna. Samskara means conception, instinct, formation in the mind. Impressions acquired by effort are subliminal or samskara, and recollecting them is an impression or memory. Anya samskara means other conceptions, other impressions or formations. Pratibandhi means contradicting, objecting, impeding. Taja samskara anya samskara pratibandhi. A new life begins with this truth-bearing light. Previous impressions are left behind, and new ones are prevented. When the power of the intellect springs from intense insight, that insight negates all previous residues of action, movement, and impression. As explained in Sutra 1.45, the sadhaka is again at a crossroads. New samskaras may continue to emerge due to oscillations of the mind, and this may impede real knowledge. These mental impressions may be superseded by the power of discrimination, and then all doubts dissolve. When doubts are cleared, the sadhaka has to discard even his discriminative knowledge. The new illuminating wisdom is free from doubts and discriminations. It blazes forth a glowing beacon of knowledge. Sutra 1.51 Tasyapi nirodhe sarva nirodhat nirbija samadhi. Tasyapi means that too. Nirodhe means by shutting, closing, restraining, destroying, by cessation. Sarva means all. Nirodhat means checking, suppressing, destroying. Nirbija means seedless. Samadhi means profound meditation. Tasyapi nirodhe sarva nirodhat nirbija samadhi. When that new light of wisdom is also relinquished, seedless samadhi dawns. The sadhaka must learn to restrain even this new impression of truth-bearing light. When both old and new impressions are dissolved, a state of seedless enlightenment arises, in which all illusions and delusions terminate. This is nirbija samadhi, the state of absolute identity with the seer. Even this distinctive knowledge of insight has to be restrained, subdued, and contained. Then, as a flame is extinguished when the wood is burnt out, or as rivers lose their existence on joining the sea, all volitions and impressions of the unconscious, subconscious, conscious and superconscious mind cease to exist. All these rivers of consciousness merge in the ocean of the seer. Nirbija samadhi is the conquest of the citta, wherein the root mind is one with the seer. As all invading thoughts are brought to an end by practice and detachment, the soul is freed from the shackles of earthly vehicles. The body, senses, mind, intelligence, and consciousness. The seer is in the amanaskattva state. When citta is dependent upon an object, idea, or symbol, the state is called sabija samadhi. In nirbija samadhi, citta dissolves and no residue of impressions remains. All residual impressions, the thinking faculty, and the feelings of I are extinguished without trace and become universal. The soul alone manifests and blazes without form in pristine clarity. Here ends the exposition on Samadhi, the first pada of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.